All right, to look ahead to tonight's debate, we have three of our reporters who have been on the campaign trail since day one. They got to sleep in their beds last night. So here they are, so excited to be back in Ottawa with a preview of the debate tonight. CTV's Glen McGregor, Kevin Gallagher, and Annie Bergeron, all joining us from the Ottawa Bureau. Good morning again to both of you. So we've got everybody on the stage for the first time tonight. Glen, I'll start with you. What are you watching for tonight? Trudeau likely to be the biggest target.
Yeah, I'm looking to see his interactions with Andrew Scheer, obviously. He's really campaigned up to this point against Doug Ford and was doing so again this morning, highlighting the Ford government's cuts to education. He did a photo op with a group of teachers who have all had various complaints about the way the education cuts are affecting their classrooms. So that's going to be a theme tonight, even though for most people outside of Ontario, it doesn't really mean a lot. But this is where the election's going to be won and lost. So you'll hear the name of Doug Ford mentioned often. I also expect Trudeau will go after Scheer over his decision not to release his platform until after the debates. Scheer has said only that he would release it before the advance polls open on the 10th of October. That's a little unusual. Stephen Harper did do that in 2008. He hadn't released his platform by the time of one of the debates. Remember, Jack Layton had this classic line where he asked Stephen Harper where is your platform? Is it hidden under your sweater vest? So I imagine the Liberal strategists are trying to come up with a clever little zinger tonight to throw at Scheer about his lack of platform so far. Marcia.
Yeah, they rehearse those zingers, but you never want them to sound rehearsed. Annie, you've been spending a lot of time with NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. What are you hearing from within the Singh camp about what he has to do tonight? Not just to break through, but again, to reintroduce himself to people. And I'll add that almost every political expert that I've talked to these past few weeks, even if they weren't in favor of the NDP policies, has said, this guy hasn't missed a beat on the campaign trail. He has exceeded expectations.
Well, that's right. And it's interesting because I was talking to campaign insiders yesterday saying, what's the strategy going into today? And essentially, they just said that Mr. Singh just needs to continue the momentum that he's been building and let people know the authentic self. You know, the campaign knows that before this campaign, Mr. Singh wasn't really well known. He didn't have a lot of time in Parliament. Of course, he was elected on a by-election. He spent a lot of the time as leader trying to campaign in Burnaby to win that seat. So he didn't have the same type of nationwide recognition as the other leaders did. So the campaign knows that for Mr. Singh, in the last few weeks, he's really been able to gain a foothold amongst Canadians who are now looking to him saying, we actually think that you are a good leader, that you do have a lot of momentum building, and that the NDP might be a good party to vote for. So the campaign was telling me yesterday that essentially what Mr. Singh needs to do is continue the momentum and continue building it and just be strong. That means he's going to be attacking Mr. Trudeau, you know, kind of continuing on this theme that we've seen for the last few weeks, which is essentially that Mr. Trudeau had 4 years to make changes. If he wanted to remove the interest on student loans, he could have done that in the last 4 years. If he wanted to end boil water advisories on all reserves, he could have done that in the last 4 years. Mr. Singh has continuously said that Mr. Trudeau just has empty promises and that his party is different because they are committed to reconciliation. They are committed to helping make life more affordable for students, to building affordable housing, to implementing pharmacare. So really for Mr. Singh, what he needs is just to continue the performance he had at the French debate, which is largely seen as exceeding expectations, as you were mentioning. He needs to be strong, and he also needs to try to divide himself and his party from Ms. May, because, of course, there are a lot of people right now who look to the two parties, especially in British Columbia. They see a lot of similarities, and they're asking, what is the main difference? So for Singh, I think you're going to see a focus on Mr. Trudeau, of course, but also on Ms. May.
Okay. And Kevin, you've been traveling with Andrew Scheer these past couple of days. You were with him this morning when he made that announcement about free museum admission. What are you hearing from his camp today? Most people are saying this is really make or break for him tonight.
Well, especially after his performance in the French debate, Marcia, where he really took a lot of attacks from all sides. And, you know, tonight, Andrew Scheer really needs to focus in on attacking the Liberals' record. Of course, the Conservatives have said all along that the Liberal government, if left in power, will continue to spend, will continue to have huge deficits, will add to the country's debt. And as far as the Conservatives are concerned, they cannot the country just cannot afford that. But on the other hand, there is this vulnerability that Andrew Scheer's left open for his party by not releasing his platform, as Glenn pointed out, because, of course, you can attack what the Liberals have already left out, what they've already announced, what they've already put out in public. But the comeback is going to be, well, where's your platform? Because the attack to the Conservatives that they're going to have to defend is, how are you going to lower taxes for Canadians to make things more affordable without cutting services that Canadians depend on? And so without having that full platform out, there's not necessarily maybe more of a concrete argument to say, well, look, all along Andrew Scheer has said, hey, we're not going to cut healthcare transfers. They're essentially going to leave it the same as it is now. So what he's saying is, with lower taxes, we can keep the services, but without that full platform, how can you fully defend that tonight on the stage?
Okay, next question.
Sorry, go ahead, Marcia.
No, go
I just add to what Kevin said. It does play into that narrative that the Liberals have tried to use to frame Andrew Scheer, is that he has some kind of hidden agenda to cut spending, and that's why they keep comparing him to Doug Ford, because Doug Ford didn't put his platform out till later too. So they want to make it seem like he's got hidden spending cuts that he just hasn't shown us yet.
Exactly.
And I think if you look back on this campaign, that may, depending on the outcome, that could be seen as a strategic error that they didn't get this out earlier.
What I do wonder, and I'll put this to you, Glenn, is Trudeau prepared for the pylon? And how do you prepare for that, knowing that you are going to be getting it from every direction tonight on stage?
Well, they do a lot of rehearsals of these things. So there's not going to be any questions that he is not expecting, although the other night at the TVA debate, he was, I think, caught a little off guard when Andrew Scheer brought up the fact that he was using 2 campaign airplanes. I don't think they were expecting that. It wasn't, the Liberal camp didn't think it was a big deal. They thought everybody knew that, but we didn't. Journalists traveling on that campaign didn't know about that. So it was a surprise. Everybody all the journalists who were watching kind of went, oh, well, I've never heard that before. But absent something like that, there's nothing that he isn't going to be prepared for. They do the process where they have these mock debates in the 2 days leading up to the actual leaders debate. They'll have staff members standing in for the other leaders and throwing out the kind of questions at them that they might expect. And so they'll rehearse every possible contingency. But there's certainly, of course, areas that he's vulnerable on. He still didn't get a lot of heat in the TVA debate about blackface. There was very little mention of the SNC-Lavalin, and there may have been reasons for that, because those 2 stories played differently in Quebec than they did in the rest of the country. So I think you'll hear more about that tonight. But then Trudeau will be able to shoot back about Scheer's citizenship, which is something that came up after the TVA debate. So lots of different avenues for attack for all of them, and they're all going to be prepared for it. So hopefully the format will allow us enough time to hear from them that we can get off a little bit off those sometimes scripted and staged answers you hear at these things.
Yeah, and Annie, people are already saying 2 hours isn't enough.
Yeah, I think that's the question a lot of people are asking, especially on social media. You have 6 leaders, 5 moderators, 2 hours. Is there going to be enough time for the leaders to go back and forth at each other like we sort of saw in the TVA debate, which was a face-to-face? But I think, as Glenn was saying, what this is all about is trying to get the leaders off their scripted talking points, which we've been hearing now for 30-something days, I think. Maybe my math is off. I'm a little confused on how many days it's been. But, we've had a lot of scripted remarks, and I think tonight's debate is really going to be trying to get the leaders off their scripted remarks. And whether that comes from the moderators asking questions that maybe is a slightly different way than what they've been used to hearing from us or from voters, or whether it's the other leaders and their ability to try to ask a question or to, have a jab that somebody wasn't expecting. And I think we probably will still get that. And then, of course, there's the French debate in a couple days, which will be another opportunity. And I think this is something that people are really paying attention to. Thanksgiving is a time when families get together. And for a lot of people, that's when they start talking about the debates. They talk about what's happened over the last few weeks. And then they really decide who they're going to vote for. So I think whatever happens, whether or not we see those jabs or whether it's still the talking points, I think you're going to see a lot of momentum in the polls, especially tomorrow, and then potentially even after the French debate later this week.
Okay.
It'd be interesting to see how Yves-François Blanchet and perhaps Maxime Bernier could torpedo some of the messaging that the top parties want to get out as well.
Okay. I want to ask each of you this last question, since I have the luxury of having all 3 of you together. And Annie, as you point out, it's been a long couple of weeks. But just an observation from each of you, because you've each spent time with the various leaders, on enthusiasm or on something that has surprised you along the trail. And I mention enthusiasm because my last panel was saying Canadians aren't really engaged. Kevin, I'll start with you. When you're out there, what is your sense of how Canadians feel about this election? Are they engaged? Anything surprise you?
I was looking at some of the Google trends today of what people are looking for, what people are searching, and some of the searches sort of would lead me to believe that maybe Canadians aren't quite engaged in this election yet. Like, what does NDP stand for? I think was the top search, and who's the leader of the Conservative Party was the second search. So from that standpoint, I don't know how much Canadians are really paying attention to every little detail like we are so far in this campaign. From what I can say from following the Conservatives around and Andrew Scheer, that there haven't been a lot of people to his rallies, and it's a little bit surprising since it's a major party. I mean, the Conservatives have a very good chance of forming government. Given that, you'd think that there would be a lot more people coming to some of these whistle-stop tours where they're going and trying to really build up the profile of a local candidate.
Yeah, that's the thing that surprised me the most, too, about this campaign is the apparent lack of, disinterest at the actual events that the leaders are attending, including those Scheer rallies, especially in Ontario. The turnout has been terrible. I was at one last week, I think it was last week, in Brampton, in an area that had been a Conservative stronghold in the past under Stephen Harper.
I saw your tweet.
And maybe 150 people there in an empty parking lot. It was embarrassing for everybody. But the Liberal campaign, compared to 2015, when you had this second coming of Trudeau mania, much more subdued crowds, much smaller crowds. They're probably better organized, and they pack fewer people into smaller rooms. But
that's always a good strategy. Small rooms,
small rooms plays good.
Small
Yeah,
rooms, big crowd.
It's actually been a little bit different. At the beginning, when it was mostly in Ontario and Quebec, you did see some smaller rallies when they unveiled their Quebec platform, probably about maybe 200, 250. It was a smaller room, so it did feel fairly packed. But as the campaign went on, and especially after the blackface, you did see momentum building. And Mr. Singh admitted that. Then we went to rallies in BC where we saw 500 people, maybe a bit more at a town hall. And of course, this is BC, so it's where the party is strongest. But you did see more and more people coming. Now, you asked Marcia about how voters are feeling. I think there is a lot of cynicism. When we were at rallies, I'd go out afterwards and just chat with people outside. And a lot of them, one, said they want to vote for the NDP, but they feel like it's a waste because they don't want Mr. Scheer or they don't like Mr. Trudeau and they feel like they don't have any option. So a lot of people were saying, I'm just not going to vote because I don't feel, I don't see myself in any of the parties. And I think you're going to see a lot of strategic voting. And I think a lot of people just said, I don't like the way that we're seeing these attacks nonstop, the digs at people, the finding conversations on social media that happened years ago. I think Canadians are kind of upset. They feel like there hasn't been a lot of substance, that we're not talking policy. Instead, we're digging up old information. I think there is a sense from people that does what's happened in the first few weeks really make a huge difference? Is there going to be a change? And does their vote matter? And I think that's what these parties, especially today in the debate, are going to have to get to the bottom of is, yes, your vote does matter, and try to convince people, especially the undecided or people who might be voting strategically, to come out and vote.
Okay, great stuff, you guys. Really, really appreciate it. Not just today, but for all your reporting these past few weeks. Annie Bergeron-Oliver, Kevin Gallagher, and Glen McGregor. We'll talk to you again soon. Keep up the great work. And, of course, you can watch the 6 leaders square off at the federal leaders debate tonight on CTV, CTV News Channel, and ctvnews.ca.